So today I was taken back to sort of the basics of atheism, and one of the reasons being is, there were two headlines that came up today, and one of them was basically the Canadian murdered by militants in the Philippines, and the other was basically the LGBT activist in Bangladesh that got hacked to death, basically. So I guess both of those things happening in one day, and they sort of made me think a little bit back about the basics of atheism, which I used to make a lot of videos about, 3 years ago or something. I used to discuss the very basics of atheism, and these types of stories, while they kind of support the idea that any sort of religious extremism or religious leaning should be put under a lot of scrutiny, because it's not like if they go without scrutiny or if they're just sort of forgotten and considered just whatever, they actually do result in deaths of people. I'm sure there's a list of things that you could itemize that have to do with religion and extremism and terrorism, etc., etc. I mean, some of these things are obvious, some of them are not. Some of them are state sanctioned, some of them are not. So there's no ifs and buts about it. But really, I want to kind of concentrate on atheism, and atheism, I would say, is on a certain level. I mean, in a practical level, atheism is counter-religious, like it is anti-religion. I always use the famous line. I forgot where I even got this line from, but you can't spell atheism without theism. So it is, at its core, in a practical sense, forgetting the philosophy and the etymology, etc., very counter-religious. And, incidents like these that happen today just kind of really make you wonder, about the basics of what your thinking is. Always want to avoid that dirty word, belief, right? And I think for some, based on conversations I've heard, been in, and things I've overheard, not necessarily the most concrete things you want to base your life on, but, people have this very exclusory sort of, or exclusive sense of what atheism is. Like, it's, especially in a secular country like Canada, where it's not, you don't have these obvious sort of, aggressive religious powers going after, control and things like that. It's much more subdued, and, it makes its way into society, into education, through funding in certain educational boards, and in daily practices of various religious groups. So it makes its way known, if you look for it in Canada. But we do largely live in a secular country, and atheism itself is, I don't get me wrong, I'm not using the word radical or anything like that, but it's definitely something that kind of stands out when you actively identify as atheist. And I guess the issues surrounding atheism is just basically the ones of, like, well, if you're so right, why this and why that, and if you're so atheist, why is this way or that way? I'm being purposely vague, because some of the stuff I've overheard is not really worth mentioning, because it's obviously it comes from a place of just kind of questioning, to put it politely. But the point I want to make is that atheism does not claim to fix the world. In fact, if you're an atheist, all atheists, and this is one of the differences between atheists and people who are religious as well. Religious people tend to believe that there is some sort of perfection out there, that there is a heavenly celestial perfection somewhere in the world, and they routinely basically make this perfection known through this God, the idea of God, but also through the earth was made for us, and the universe is exactly the way it is because human beings are, and not too long ago, heliocentrism, etc., etc. We human beings, a human being is made in the image of God, and the sun goes around the earth, etc., etc. So they've always and routinely and still do make claims about perfection. I feel that any atheist still, we don't make claims about perfection. In fact, most, if not all atheists, I can't say for sure, but I mean, in most of the atheist readings, in fact, all of the atheist readings I've done, atheism, they don't claim perfection of anything. They believe, evolution, for instance, is as Richard Dawkins would say, a violent, messy, aggressive, imperfect, a process. It doesn't discriminate against any species. It doesn't have any preference or anything like that. To kind of delve deeper into that a little bit, even human beings in general tend to think that we have attained some level of perfection based on our level in the animal kingdom on the planet Earth. We tend to think of ourselves at the top of the food chain, etc., etc. But surviving is not necessarily an indicator of intelligence or an indicator of one species being better than the other. Like it's a very nebulous concept that doesn't look at any top-down sort of perfection. So enough about that. I'm just saying the basics of atheism is not another religion like most people would say, and I keep running into this as well, right? But it's not a religion. It's not. So anyway, headlines like today, like the ones I mentioned, they just make you step back and think about what it is there's that word again, believe in. I mean, technically you could go on and on about what belief is and what it isn't, blah, 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 but atheists do not believe in the sense that religious people believe. There's a lack of belief for any of this perfection that the religious would claim to, have somewhere out there. And it is in pursuit of that perfection that they routinely, fall to ignorance, fall to, in extremist cases, murder, violence, discrimination, so that's the way it works. You take the side of religion, you will end up doing, not you specifically, but religion tends to always inspire some of the nastiest things you could think of, especially these days. Horrid things. And that's the way it is. And I mean, even if it's not extreme acts, it's everyday things, right? Like the LGBT person. I mean, it's only in 2005 that Canada legalized same-sex marriage, right? And I feel today there's still a lot of discrimination, But that's so it goes. LGBT people are not one of God's people, so unfortunately, it takes a lot of lobbying and litigation to change things that are biological in nature. Anyway, that's my video. I just want to say that, and have a good one. Bye.